I want to give you a hypothetical scenario. You're in a relationship with a girl, and the relationship seems to have run its course. It started out promising, but over time, it's deteriorated, and you're just not that into her anymore. What were once interesting little quirks are now things you don't like. The yellow flags have turned red, and while the relationship hasn't gotten toxic or abusive by any means, there's no longer a spark there, and it's time to call it off. So you have the talk with her and tell her that we should break up and that we should see other people. Because as much as I wanted it to work, this just isn't working for me anymore. Alright, so far, while this stinks, this seems incredibly normal. But then, you say as you're breaking up with her, so, all those times I said I was attracted to you and liked you? I was just saying that to make you feel good. In reality, I was never attracted to you. I was lying the entire time. I just said those things so you wouldn't feel hurt, and I never meant any of those words that came out of my mouth. I just didn't want to hurt your feelings. That seems like a really crappy thing to do, right? First off, you've got to have a maturity level to call things off well before that, if that was the case, and not just string her on like that. Second off, even though you were trying to do good and not hurt her, you just made things a million times worse. How do you think her self-esteem is going to feel now and going forward? How do you think she's going to feel the next time someone tells her she's beautiful or someone tells her that he loves her? And she might not believe it because you said it all the time and didn't mean it one bit and openly admitted to lying. Again, situations and circumstances can change, and you can definitely love someone and then not love them or not be attracted to them later on. But we're talking about an outright lie here where you said those things without ever meaning those words and openly admitted it to her face. It makes you look like a horrible, immature person who has no business being in a relationship, and it can shatter the other person forever and lead them to never trust anyone again. Well, I bring that up because this man right here that you've been watching this entire time is Green Bay Packers head coach Bart Starr. Need I say more? If you're a longtime viewer of the channel, you know that Bart Starr was an atrocious head coach who was an absolute goldmine for content because the Packers gave this bumbling idiot nearly a decade in charge, despite the fact that he was very clearly in over his head and had no idea what he was doing, with his legacy as a player throughout the 1960s, carrying his entire coaching career way past its expiration date. I'm going to link a ton of Bart Starr videos in the upper right corner of this one throughout, because there's basically an entire catalog of Starr content at this point because of how terrible he was. And today, we're going to take a deep dive into how to not manage player relations, how to lie about everything for no reason whatsoever, and how to not motivate your players or convince anyone to ever play for you or trust anything that you say. Because in 1981, when the Green Bay Packers and head coach Bart Starr decided to part ways with running back Steve Atkins, they went about it in one of the dumbest ways possible that deserves a deep dive more than 4 decades later. Because this is the story behind Bart Starr, one of the strangest roster cuts in Packers history, and how terrible Bart Starr was at everything as a coach. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel, because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one that you may not have heard of before. So if you like that sort of stuff and want to learn more, then this is definitely the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing and for helping us grow this community. And with that in mind, let's talk about the time that a member of the pack got stabbed in the back. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context to understand who the player was that was about to be cut. When people talk about the biggest bust in the history of the Packers, excluding first rounders, odds are this is one of the first names that comes to mind. This is running back Steve Atkins, and in 1979, the Packers, following a bottom 5 rushing attack in football the year before in 1978, decided to double dip at that position, as with their first 2 picks, they chose Georgia Tech man Eddie Lee Ivory in round 1 and Maryland man Steve Atkins in round 2. Ivory turned out to be a solid player when healthy, and even finished the 1982 season second in the NFL in rushing touchdowns, playing a key part in helping the Packers get to the playoffs for just the second time since the merger. Steve Atkins, on the other hand, not so much, as I think it's fair to say that when you're a second-round pick, and a high one at that, and you finish your career in Green Bay with 467 rushing yards, that the pick did not work according to plan. Despite being the 8th running back taken in the 1979 NFL Draft, 20 players in that class had more rushing yards than he did, including 3 quarterbacks. This did not work out at all, and finding quality footage of him doing anything in the National Football League was somewhat of a struggle as a result. The first 2 years of Green Bay for Atkins were really rough. I'm not going to go too much into the weeds of it, but to make a long story short, it wasn't good. He was losing confidence in his abilities after a rough preseason in 1980, and was slipping further and further down the depth chart, not just because of Eddie Lee Ivory, but because of the acquisition of Gary Ellis, a player cut by the Rams as a rookie who the Packers liked a lot. He couldn't stay on the field, as in 1979, he missed the second half of the season with an injured knee, and in 1980, he missed the second half of the season with a sprained ankle. Atkins had played 0 snaps in November or December in his first 2 seasons. Some teammates questioned his toughness and his desire, with one prior to the start of the 1981 season calling him out during a radio show and saying that he didn't give it his all, and saying that the Packers should get rid of him because all he does is show up for a game or 2 and then get hurt and go back to the East Coast. That'll be a video for another time because, man, that drama was bizarre. He was also extremely homesick, as he lived in the DMV area his whole life, being born in Virginia, going to high school in Virginia, and attending college at the University of Maryland. He had issues adjusting to life in Green Bay and wasn't the happiest of people, seeing as his girlfriend lived in DC and his family, who he was extremely close with, still lived in Virginia. He even asked to be traded at one point, saying, "The strange thing is, I like playing for the Green Bay Packers. If Green Bay was on the East Coast, it would have been great. In other words, if Green Bay wasn't Green Bay, I'd be in a much better spot." All in all, it was just a bad situation on and off the field where it seemed like nothing was right for Atkins. It wasn't a good fit in a variety of ways. However, it seemed like things were maybe going to change in 1981. The first 2 years for this man right here were rough, and there was no denying that. But maybe Atkins was a late bloomer and was finally ready to come onto the scene, make an impact in Green Bay's offense, and give Green Bay one of the deepest backfields in the league. Not only did he show up to camp early, but he drew rave reviews from Bart Starr, who said throughout camp that Atkins looked good and had a chance to beat out Gary Ellis for the starting fullback job. If Atkins keeps playing and improving like this, he could be starting for this team and making a huge impact going forward. He's been a real standout player throughout camp. So things are finally looking up, right? Well, not so much, because a few weeks into 1981, the Packers decided to cut Steve Atkins. Despite Starr's comments on how good Atkins looked throughout camp and how he was competing for a starting job, it just wasn't meant to be. Atkins had negative rushing yards in Week 1 against the Chicago Bears, and in Week 3 against the Los Angeles Rams, he fumbled the ball and was involved in another turnover in a 35-23 loss. By the way, both turnovers that Atkins was involved in led to touchdowns for the Rams, in a game where they won by 12 points, or 2 touchdowns. Not good. Not only was he not taking playing time away from Gary Ellis or Eddie Lee Ivory, but he was a detriment to the team anytime he was on the field. Green Bay tried to trade him, but they found no suitors outside of the NFC Central, and not wanting to trade him within the division, the Packers let him go, releasing him. And if that was the end of the story, then this isn't much of a story. The Packers had every reason to get rid of Atkins. Truly. They had every reason to cut bait with their second-round pick, not even 1/4 of the way through his third season. He wasn't playing well, he wasn't happy being in Wisconsin, he wasn't getting playing time, he wasn't holding onto the ball, and some teammates were upset with him and questioned his commitment, which is a label that you don't shake off lightly. And after cutting this man right here, Bart Starr spoke to the press and said on his decision, "You pile on all the things which have happened in the past. Feelings, comments, injuries, you name it. It became a load that he simply couldn't handle. He was erring to a degree that we were reluctant to play him. It's a very tough move because we've lost a top choice, but we just would have been compounding matters by retaining him." Again, a fine answer from Starr. He was making too many mistakes, there was just too much going on with him, and we felt as if we needed a clean start, as much as it stinks to give up on this guy this early on. Totally normal and acceptable answer. If he stopped right there, this isn't an issue. But then, a reporter asked him how he fell that far, and went from potentially starting over Ellis to being cut. It's a valid question, because when you realize how much Bart Starr was hyping Atkins up during the preseason and during training camp, only for him to be cut after 3 weeks of the regular season, people want to know an answer about how he went from almost a starter to not even playable. However, as valid of a question as it is, this is a layup. This is an absolute layup. The man literally had negative rushing yards in week 1 and fumbled in week 3 while being involved in another mix-up that same week with this quarterback. You had such an easy out here. All you have to do is say, things changed, and you know how quickly things can change in this league, and you're good. All you have to do is say, we need guys who can hold on to the football, and you're good. All you have to do is say, we just needed a clean start, or say, sometimes things don't translate over from practice to a real game, or say, we weren't seeing the development and progression that we were seeing initially, and you're in the clear. It is almost impossible to screw this question up. But Bart Starr found a way. Oh man, did he find a way. Because as it turned out, he was lying this entire time. Because as Bart Starr said, I kid you not, I was saying some of those things, believe me, for Steve's benefit, because he's a good person and we've enjoyed working with him. Seriously. In other words, all the talk about him competing for the starting job? Yeah, that was never going to happen. I was just saying that because I didn't want to let Steve down. I didn't really love you. I was just pretending so your feelings wouldn't be hurt. I was pretending that you were a good player this entire time. In reality, you're not that good. And I mean, do I even need to say why this is a really bad idea? Do I even need to say why this strategy by Bart Starr, as it pertains to this man right here, made no sense at all? First off, if the guy was truly a good person and you want to treat him well, it's not a good idea to lie to that person. It's like saying that you want to give someone good customer service at a hotel, so your way of going about that is by screaming at them every time they're at the front desk. Not wanting to hurt him in the short term could hurt him a ton in the long term if that's what you truly cared about. Because how is this man supposed to believe any sort of praise or words of affirmation again when his own coach for the past 2.5 seasons came out and said that he lied to him about everything? But in terms of other reasons why this is a horrible strategy and why Steve Atkins got done dirty by Bart Starr for no reason, how do you think other players on the Packers feel? If Starr compliments them and says, you might be starting this week, or says, I like the way you've been playing lately, Starr might be the only coach in the NFL where you don't know if he's being genuine or not, and if he means those words. He could be faking it. He might just like you, but he might not think you're that good. If you're an undrafted free agent, why would you want to play for the Packers? If Bart Starr calls you up and says, "We like you a lot, and we think you can bring something to the table here and compete for a starting job," why should you take anything he says at face value? He's already admitted to lying to try and not hurt your feelings. I swear, Bart Starr was just a decade-long experiment of what would happen if Michael Scott became a head coach in the NFL, especially with something like this where there was quite literally no reason or incentive to do this. Even if you were lying to Atkins the entire time, you didn't need to say it. You had every reason to cut him. This wasn't a surprise cut that came out of nowhere. This wasn't an unjustifiable cut. You could have said anything else besides those times I said that Atkins was good and was competing for the job. I was lying. He wasn't that good. I just didn't want to hurt his feelings. And I promise you, this would have been a non-issue. You could have made up some crap about astrology and said that you made the move because Mercury was in retrograde, and it would have raised fewer eyebrows and caused fewer fractures between you and your players from a trustworthiness standpoint than what you said. Seriously, you chose the worst possible answer. In cutting Steve Atkins, and in cutting this man right here, you said the dumbest possible thing. So as a word to the wise, to any coaches out there who might be watching this, don't lie to your players. If you think you're doing something right and helping them out by lying, I promise you, you're not. Just like you don't tell someone when you break up with them that you pretended to enjoy bedtime and didn't mean any of the times you said "I love you" because you didn't want to hurt her feelings because she's such a nice girl, you don't tell a player the same thing. And if you do want to try that with your significant other, try it. Let me know how it goes in the comments down below, because I guarantee you, it won't be good. Steve Atkins was not a good running back and never played again after the 1981 season, and he was a massive bust in Packers history. But even if he deserved to be cut due to everything surrounding him, both on and off the field, he deserved better than a coach lying to him and destroying his self-esteem by pretending he was good and was competing this entire time. Because in 1981, thanks to Bart Starr, not only did Steve Atkins need to find a new team, he also needed to find a therapist. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name at the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.